Hello. Is media telling the truth about Venezuela? We get a lot of reports in media now, at least I do. And as an expert on this topic, who have been active in the Venezuelan resistance for 15 years, a Swedish American, I will give you my analysis after looking what is being reported. Honestly, I see the headlines, but I don't have time to watch all these movies. I see a few seconds here, a few seconds there, but the information I get is from other sources, not from media. We've been doing intelligence work for many years in Venezuela, so I know a thing or two about it. For instance, Russian army to fight US in Venezuela? Question mark. Well, we know from Venezuela that the Russians are there. There are sophisticated airplanes. There are Russian tanks. They don't work so well in the hot climate without AC. But they bought Chinese tank, the CBD 2000, a troop carrier, armored troop carrier that's amphibious, and there are also some tank versions of it. It doesn't have strong armor though. And in fact, I was the one who discovered that the Venezuelan regime had bought those when a member of the resistance sent me a photo from inside the ship that delivered them from China. So as you see, we do have some inside information. And in fact, we, and I personally, have passed information to the DOJ. We had, for instance, the bodyguard in the inner circle of the drug kingpin himself. We smuggled him out of Venezuela and handed him over to the Americans, and he was crucial to get Diosdado Cabello indicted for drug trafficking. But the Americans keep saying that Nicolas Maduro is the head. The bodyguard of Diosdado Cabello said that Diosdado is the head of the cartel. Now, this is a lot of videos, in my opinion, a lot of videos trying to get the attention by sounding the alarm about a possible war for low information viewers who don't know the background. So let me give you a little bit of the background, because these are like presenting. Usually there are two categories. Either those who are saying this is a war and they are like informing about the war, and they are either for or against it, typically against it, because there's a lot of Russian propaganda here. And there's a lot of videos saying that Trump is accusing Venezuela, the regime, of being drug trafficking. And there is no proof of that. That's a lie. There's plenty of proof of that. And I've seen it firsthand. I don't have to rely on other sources. I know it to be a fact. And as I said, we've done... See, here's this alarmistic YouTube. Another forever war. No. Let me tell you the truth story about what's going on here. Here, COP divided over Trump's Venezuela strikes. Here, finally, somebody who puts the opposition leader, MSNBC. Wow, who could have guessed that they would be the ones? Maria Corina Machado. Let me get into what is going on here, because there is one point of view that seldom comes up. This was the exception. Somebody who actually puts the voice of the Venezuelan people into the equation. Because typically we have the MAGA, the Trump striking drug cartels. Trump doesn't want to say he wants a regime change because that's not popular with the GOP. So he says he's going after the drugs, and he says, oh, they are killing Americans. That's his domestic policy justification. It's not true. There is another reason to go after the cocaine. And that is because the cocaine business is an extremely large, I'm sure the biggest criminal business in the world. And it has global implications, and it affects the power balance in the world, because on the side, Behind Maduro stands Cuba. Behind Cuba stands Russia, Vladimir Putin. This is, and Iran is connected to North Korea, all the usual suspects. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, everyone is in this. That's the alliance of the bad guys. And Venezuela is key in the alliance of the bad guys. Because, and let me switch here to Google Earth. Here we have Venezuela, and here's Colombia. And those who defend the regime and oppose the strikes, well, I also oppose the strikes on boats in open sea, killing people, because that's illegal. But having said that the method is illegal, I am 100% convinced that the majority of those boats, almost all, carry cocaine. But let me get back to that. Those who are against this and criticize the plans, they say that the coca is grown in Colombia. Yes, but it's refined in Venezuela. They don't want to see that. They say it's grown in Colombia, it's transported in the Pacific. The cartel doesn't want us to see what's happening. But as I said, we smuggled out the bodyguard of the kingpin himself, Diosdado Cabello. He was in Caracas, over here, on vacation. All his colleagues, there were 6 in a group, the other 5 died in botched robberies, accidents, whatever, during the vacation. And obviously he knew that that's the method his boss has for killing people he doesn't want alive anymore. So he knew that he was on the list, and he sought help from the resistance, and we smuggled him out. We were 2 persons who knew about the operation, me and the one who organized it, a former Venezuelan policeman. And I'm not afraid to say this because Diosdado Cabello knows who did it. And how does he know? Well, I know that he knows because I was inside Venezuela. I went here to look at a place where I'd been helping refugees in 2019 to go back and see what was up and how things had developed. And when I was there, I went out a little bit on the countryside, drove around because the AC was horrible. I rented a car with AC and drove a little bit to get air. And then I said, okay, I'll drive to the border of where it's safe. I'll not get into the guerrilla area. But guess what? The military had no checkpoint. So I was way into the coca cultivating area without knowing it. And the guerrilla kidnapped me. And then they held me for over 2 months. And they took me into Venezuela and they interrogated me. And that's why I know that they know who smuggled out the bodyguards, because they asked me about it with name and all. So, and also this experience taught me many other things. They should never have kidnapped me, because if they had not kidnapped me, I would not have known all these things I came to know now. I went up here and the military had a checkpoint there, and it turns out that the military was actually, they were not fighting the guerrilla, they were helping the guerrilla. The guerrilla asked me some questions up here. Why? Because I've been flying a drone a little bit to get the panorama for my video in YouTube. And they asked, why did you film a military base? What interest of the guerrilla is it if I film a base of the military? Think about that. The obvious answer is that they are cooperating. There are other evidence too, lot of circumstantial evidence that lead to the same point. Because at the checkpoint, he checked my passport, he called his boss on the cell phone, and after I was released, I asked about that, I inquired about it, and he had never contacted the military. So the boss he contacted was in the guerrilla, not the military. So, and then they kidnapped me and brought me to a place, and by chance of incredible coincidences, that I managed to get a glimpse right here when I was walking here, always blindfolded, obviously, but I stepped bad on a stone here, and my head was thrown back like that. And when it threw back, the blindfold moved up a little bit by the jerk, and I got a fraction of a second glimpse down that way, and I saw the river and the plain, and I knew that I was at the Cuesta, because I knew the geography, and this is the Catatumbo River. I knew that I was on the edge looking down at the Catatumbo River. And a few houses earlier, this house I reached by walking along the edge from over there. And this house I had reached walking from that house. And when I was in this house, they had allowed me to watch outside. And on one day when the air was extremely clear, I had seen that profile in the background. The Cordillera going up and then going down a little bit and up a little bit and down again. And that thing there is characteristic. And you can only see that from a very certain angle, like 5 degrees. So combining the angle of that with the Cuesta, I could identify to within a few miles where I'd been. And then, as you see here, the photo on Google Earth is very low resolution. I can't use that to identify the location. So what I did was I picked up the phone and I looked, is there a high resolution satellite image of this place available? No. Okay, then I ordered the satellite to take a new picture here in high resolution. And with that picture, I could recognize it. So I had to take several pictures before I found it. And that's why I knew where I was. And when I had been here, I felt the smell, and I realized that they were processing coca leaves into pasta de coca. And here's where they throw out the liquid. I was here, and when I had to go to do things, there's no toilet here. They use this as a lab. And then I passed here and I felt the smell of the solvent they used. And I heard the plastic smell. So I know they were doing that. And I heard sometimes they were driving up with trucks here. And you see over here is a much bigger site for processing the coca. And if we look what is down that road, it goes down the valley here, right? And what we have here, zoom in. You see the pattern? This pattern is characteristic. That's coca bushes. And the reason why there is more green here and less green here is because here they recently harvested the leaves from the coca bush. So pay attention to the color now. We go out and we see the valley. You see all of this is coca plantation. This is the biggest coca plantation area in the world. Not just in Colombia, in the world. And one of the guys who I found, by the way, on Facebook later, I found his photo. And I found that he celebrated his 18th birthday, and he did that here. I recognized on the photo, you can see the background. So he was celebrating his birthday down here, just below where I was held prisoner. And he told me when we were, he was a god. They always took turns, they always have one god. So he told me 98% of the coca from Venezuela goes to Colombia. So he's among those who are involved in guarding these coca plantations. And he tells me that in the biggest coca growing area in the world, and he tells me that 98% of the coca goes to Colombia, which, by the way, is not strange. If you look at the topography here, I think I have the topography, you can see that it makes perfect sense that it would go to Venezuela. Here we come. All right. You see, the border is here, between Colombia and Venezuela. This is where they grow the coca. Here there are bad mountain roads, which I happened to see because when they released me, see, after they took me there, they brought me into Venezuela, down here, for a couple of months almost. And there I was interrogated, and that's where they asked me about that, my friend who had brought out the bodyguard of the drunk hotel, or the head of the drunk hotel. And then they took me back here to release me. So therefore I came to see this area too. It's very beautiful, Catatumbo. It's beautiful, beautiful. It's a pity they don't use this for tourists, but the way it is now, it's pure guerrilla area. This is the basic base for ELN guerrilla, the last armed insurrection in Latin America. And the roads on the other side of the border in Venezuela are excellent, whereas on this side they're horrible. It just makes no sense. In Colombia, there's a lot of controls on the road looking for cocaine. It makes absolutely no sense to smuggle it through Colombia. It makes all the sense in the world to smuggle it into Venezuela. And it doesn't just make sense. We know, I know from the bodyguard, from his testimony, that that's what they do. So, let's see if I can turn on some map over this there. Open street map. So here's the border. He told us that the coca from here is handed over to the Venezuelans here in I think it's called Oropa, I forgot the name. Yeah, Orope. And from there it's transported to the military base in Merida. That place I saw in the mountains. And then it goes further up. And that's the coca that's grown up here in Catatumbo. What's being grown down on the plains here on the other side, it goes over the border here, it goes with rivers, it comes up to a finca here, which he described in great detail at Boca de Anaro. I think we can put on the satellite here. And there is no bridge here, there is a ferry. But down here, there's a road that goes in, and here they have a guard, and over here they land the airplanes, and here they store the cocaine while they're waiting for the planes. And he said in this house they have pilots sleeping, waiting for orders to fly with this there. So there's a big traffic here of small narco-avionetas, as they call in Spanish, going out. And this is just one. There are several of these big farms that they used for that. They confiscated the farms in order to use them for that. So he told us everything about the drug operation that Diosdado Cabello is managing in Venezuela to get these drugs through the country and out in the world. And up here we have another informant who told us how they smuggle cocaine with the bunker to the ships, because I think Google Earth is faster, so I'll use that. You know, the shipping traffic that goes from the Gulf of Mexico and Texas to China, it goes this way. It doesn't go through the canal, because the big ships, they have to go this way and south of Africa. And when they pass here, they go out and sell them bunker oil, which is cheap in Venezuela, oil producing country. And he said that when they're sending them out from here, they sent like 1.5 ton of cocaine every time, and he never saw it. And I figured out it has to be dissolved in the oil. And I tipped off the American authorities about that, and they came back after a few days and said, you know, if you have the name of the ship, you can get a reward. And how's that? I said, well, they actually had a ship here that they knew there was cocaine on in Puerto, where is it? Puerto Cabello, I think it's called. Puerto Cortes. And they had a tip that there was cocaine in it, but they couldn't find it. And after I told them about that dissolved thing, they had open barrels of tar, and sure enough, it was dissolved in the tar. there's still a lot of cocaine going out. They have been, and they always change method. In the past they have, now I'm in the wrong country. In the past they have smuggled it out on the Orinoco River, because it also comes into Venezuela down here from Colombia. A couple of points here, and it's smuggled up here. As I said, we've done intelligence. We have a lot of information. I had a GIS system with all this smuggling when we were active with this. We even had information about guerrilla bases down here in the Amazon jungle, a place where they smuggle cocaine to Brazil, in a river in the rainforest that's completely covered with tree canopy. So the river is not visible even on satellite images. If you are not an Indian, actual Native American living in the jungle, you wouldn't know it existed. But our sources were Native Americans living in the jungle. And the guerrilla base of the FARC, the Disidencia de la FARC, as it's called, those who did not sign the peace agreement, we had their bases infiltrated. And here, where they dig gold, a lot of ELN guerrilla, we had them infiltrated. So, yeah, we done our intelligence. So we know how it's transported up here, where it changes hand, how it's going down the river. And then from the river going out to the sea, which is the opening, the mouth of this river is, since it's tidal regime, it's kind of dangerous. And there they used to put the cocaine under ships to go out and take it off when they reach the destination. This they did many, many years ago. And remarkably, it's not until now, the last month or so, that they discovered in Sweden, wow, this is happening. And we've been telling them, for a long time, I've been telling them, you have to watch for this. And the naivete here is incredible. So when people say, oh, they don't smuggle cocaine from there, the only thing it means is that the person saying this is naive, and that these people are incredibly inventive, they are creative and able to fool these, what shall I call it, naive people. So, yeah, let me tell you another story. He also told us where they live, the exact coordinates for the houses, because now there has been talk about Trump targeting. Well, they could target the places where they used to process the drugs, but the farm there, I think the latest photo I looked at right now before making this, here, Boca de Anaro, here it is. This place here, it's changed. There is more vegetation here, so it may well be that they stopped using this after the bodyguard sneaked away. And another point is that he told us that where they have these sites, around them there are like other houses here and there, and some of those houses are booby-trapped. And that's as a precaution, because if some police or special forces, Americans for instance, would come, because obviously their strategy is to take houses around and then approach from there. So therefore they booby-trapped those houses to get a loud warning if somebody's trying to sneak up on them. And therefore it's simply easier just to drop a missile on the place. And he also told us about the safe houses, and I can show you one. The house where Diosdado Cabello himself lived, the head of the drug cartel, is up here. And you can see here he has, obviously that's where he has the guards. And from the house of the guards, the only road in is this road here, and this gate, and go up and go around. So from this place here, they can see who is approaching. all the way. And then they have an escape route on the other side, going down here to this road and sneaking away on another road out. They always think about those kind of details. When we had the bodyguard under our guard, which was the last time Trump did the big shutdown, we couldn't hand him over to the Americans because of Trump's shutdown. Is that a coincidence? You tell me. So when we had him, and the head of the cartel was looking for him with a big, big reward, and we had to move him like every 2-3 days, and they were always like 1 or 2 days behind only. During that time, Diosdado moved from that house to another safe house, but we had another bodyguard infiltrated, so we knew everything he was doing. And one would have thought that that would have been a good moment for the Americans, when Trump was president, mind you, to take action. But no interest. We also know where the president lives, in this house here, the bodyguard told us, and how it's constructed and all, with a view down on the military base. It's part of the military base, but sitting on top of it with an exit on the back, a couple of exits, emergency exits to the residential areas here. And another thing, the last thing I want to show you is the favorite farm of this head of the bodyguard over here is from the east of Venezuela. And here he has a farm. You see, they come in here, and there's the guards sitting there, and here's the house, and here they have cows. Because in the old days, they used to fill the cows with cocaine. They opened the stomach, operated in cocaine, and sewed them shut, and with the hair grown over the wound, they shipped them out alive with cocaine inside. I don't know if they still do it, but this was apparently a place they used for that. The bodyguard told us that on one occasion, I think there were 3 policemen who came here to investigate something, and they saw things they should not have seen. And they tried to get away, to leave the job, to escape, but to no avail. They were all dead within a couple of weeks. So that's how the cartel operates. Now, all those who say that they are not involved in drug trafficking, that's a complete and utter ignorance or lie. One or the other, ignorance or lie. Because this is the central hub for the cocaine trafficking in the world. And I'm sure a lot of cocaine goes back to Colombia. We know from the border over here in Cucuta, where, by the way, that was a piece of news I just saw now today, that the leading politicians here were involved in this, which does not surprise me one bit. They are absolutely in bed with the ELN guerrilla. The ELN guerrilla, Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela and Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, are in it together, as is the regime in Cuba, who are the ones who are providing the security and controlling Venezuela in practice, and Vladimir Putin behind them, putting on the nuclear umbrella to protect them. That's what we're up against. Now, I had to restart the video because I have a limited time to record on this camera. But there are 2 more things that we have to discuss. First, Venezuela's military capacity. We can see here, this video just came out. Former NATO commander warns Venezuela war could erupt within a week. Do I believe that? Yes. But what does war mean? It's true that Venezuela has Soviet tanks. It has, we've seen in Ukraine how useless those are, right? Now with drones and everything. And Venezuela has Sukhoi aircraft, modern Soviet-made aircraft. And they have, or Russian. To me, Russia today is the Soviet Union. It's not Russia. Putin is a product of the Soviet Union, and he continues in the same vein. And they had assets, and that's what Putin is continuing to do, to cultivate the assets from the Cold War. So they have those, and they have Chinese-made equipment also. They have some Iranian equipment. But having been many years in the Venezuelan resistance and having talked to a lot of people who are former Venezuelan militaries who have been coming out from Venezuela to Miami, where I used to live, little by little, I've got an idea of what state of repair they're in. They also had F-16s, by the way. And I was told that most of those are not in a flyable condition. And as regards the almost said Soviet again, the Russian planes, the Sukhoi, the Venezuelan militaries themselves, those who have left the country, they are not too concerned about them. They have surface-to-air missile systems, yes, to defend Caracas. But basically, they consider the Venezuelan military, those who have left the country, consider the Venezuelan military more or less a paper tiger. And when the people were doing an uprising in 2014, they took over a state, an entire state, Táchira, for a month. And the regime the regime in Havana, Cuba, that is, because they are the ones who control Venezuela, had to send in, according to what I was told, by the Cuban resistance, 60,000 troops. And that was confirmed in Venezuela. And I have videos of them arriving in Venezuela and being transported to Táchira. And there they used airplanes and tanks against the resistance, against normal people with Molotov cocktails. So if a real military like the US would go in and attack them, I don't think they would last very long. Not longer than what was his name there? Saddam Hussein in Iraq. So, and they have militia. They have the Cuban theory of militia. And in fact, I read the manual, the supposedly secret manual that Anonymous hacked and got out. So I've read it to see what their plan is for defense. And it's basically like an urban guerrilla kind of defense they're planning to put up. But we know that more than 90% of the Venezuelan people want the regime gone. So it's a very, very unpopular regime in Venezuela. And therefore, I don't believe that it would be very difficult to beat them. Of course, Putin and Russia and China also will say that they would help. I don't think China will do it, no way. Because China is just interested in Chinese, domestic interests. And what they need are the resources. And they can get them without conquering the country, the same as the US can buy oil. They don't need to conquer a country in order to buy its oil. But Russia, on the other hand, Russia wants Venezuela for the strategic importance, because Venezuela is sitting in the southern part of the Caribbean Sea. And as you know, the weakest spot of the United States. The United States is the enemy of Russia. We know that. And this is the weak spot of the US. And Venezuela is down here. Also, the US has Puerto Rico. So Venezuela is down here and threatening that. Plus, Venezuela is an oil country, so they can feel bunker to the Russian warships here, which they could never do on Cuba. Plus, it's sitting next to the Panama Canal, which is a very important asset. So Venezuela is very strategically important for Russia. It's not the assets, it's the strategic location. And it's also much closer to fire missiles there. But does Russia have the possibility to defend Venezuela today? Look at what's happening in Ukraine. I don't think so. And by the way, you know which country has or should have the by far biggest self-interest in overthrowing the Maduro regime? Ukraine. They have the interest. Ukraine. Because Venezuela is a strategic asset for Russia, and Russia is the enemy of Kiev. Now, So I know from what I've been told, not from personal viewing, but from personally being informed about it, that Americans are inside Venezuela, which they were not in 2018 when we smuggled out the bodyguard. But now they are. And the indications are that they will actually attack. And when they do, they will probably target the regime and things that are of crucial importance for the drug trafficking. That's what I hope, at least. But then the president over here in Colombia, Gustavo Petro, he is helping the drug trafficking. He's helping, as I said in the first section, the guerrilla, which is a part of the Venezuelan regime, which is a part of the Cuban regime, which is a part of the Russian regime. That's the global cartel, Cuban cartel, I call it. So you can't count on help from Colombia, even though there are Americans in Colombia, even up on the border there in Cucuta, where I stayed at the military base after being released in Cucuta, where there are Americans, and these Americans have been the target of various bomb attacks, car bomb attacks, inside the military base. And today news came out that leading politicians here are part of the drug cartel. And I have, the investigations I've done after being released have led me to a number of people, because I found out who held me kidnapped. I found their names and pictures and family relationships and what they're doing. So already before today, I knew that this area is completely infiltrated by drug trafficking. This part of Colombia is completely in the same pocket as the Venezuelan regime on the other side of the border here. So there is no help to be expected from Colombia. None. They're in the same, unless the military there go against their president. Because Gustavo Petro does not have the same hold on power in his country as Trump does in the US. The judicial institutions and so are more independent, and Congress is more independent in Colombia than they are in the US. Now, that's about the possibility of an attack and the likelihood. I think it's perfectly possible it could happen. It could also be called off. But for now, the bet is that they will attack. So then the question is, what will happen to Venezuela afterwards? You know, a few years ago, I think it was 2018, by the way, I set up an organization for Venezuelan refugees, exiles, because we had to call off the resistance since the regime was implementing genocide, Holodomor, genocide by hunger. And our prognosis, my prediction was that 5 million people would starve to death if we continued the fight. So I personally took the decision to call it off. And sure enough, in the time estimated that 5 million people would die, 5 million people left the country. So that I see as a kind of confirmation that the estimate was right for the number of people who were in starvation at the time. Regime-induced starvation, which killed about, in my estimate, 200,000. In the estimate of the United Nations, 200 to 300,000. So that was a real thing. And they also committed a lot of crimes against humanity. The International Court in Hague, the prosecutor has said that there is clear evidence that they committed crimes against humanity since 2017. So the resistance was called off. And then I created an organization called Fuerza de Paz Venezuela in order to organize people who had fled, in order to safeguard peace and the rule of law after the regime fell. And that was an instant success, but unfortunately the website had a flaw. We got a ton of people registering, but the system it had an error in it, so it didn't work. And then before it was ready, fixed, the regime had blocked the IP of the site. But from that, I knew that most of them were former police and military. So from there, I knew that there was a tremendous interest of civil society in Venezuela to do this. that website was later hacked after I had been kidnapped. It was hacked and destroyed completely. So I'm no longer involved in this personally, but I do have contacts who are in the organization of Maria Corina Machado, and the Nobel Peace Prize winner now. And therefore, I know that they are organized and prepared and much better than what I had been setting up. So the Venezuelan people are perfectly prepared to take control of the country. A lot of people abroad think maybe that the resistance was just on the streets with screaming and protesting. No, there were a lot of militaries also in the resistance and policemen. The military is in the drug cartel. The Cartel de los Soles is military, it's generals. They have hundreds of generals in Venezuela, but they are mostly, they're not real military, if I to call it like that. The real military on lower levels are totally against this. The problem is that the military is completely controlled by Cuban intelligence. They can't organize anything inside because the Cuban intelligence monitors everything. And they also use Iranian technique and drones. So they need some disruptor from outside to come in and disrupt the organization of this totalitarian regime that is completely illegitimate, by the way, because the people voted last year for Edmundo González Urrutia, the candidate that was put up by the party of Maria Corina Machado, because she was not allowed to run herself. So the people of Venezuela have an elected president who has not been allowed to take office. So the moment this regime here falls, the regime supported by Cuba and Russia, the moment that falls, there is an elected, duly elected president to install in Venezuela. And there is an organization ready to take control. So those who say, no, it will be chaos, are wrong. I've been 15 years in the Venezuelan resistance, and I'm telling you, they are wrong. It will not be chaos. It will be a return to order from the chaos that is now. And final point in this video. All of this I see in the media. It usually takes the point of view that Trump is attacking Venezuela, Trump is starting another war, Trump is bad, therefore Maduro, the regime of Venezuela, must be good. We must defend the sovereignty of Venezuela. I saw a Swedish, I forgot if he was military or academic, saying that, oh, it would be illegal to attack Venezuela. No, it would not, because the legitimately elected president in Venezuela, with the people behind him, has asked Trump for help. So, I mean, from the point of view of international law, it would be legal. From the point of view of US constitutional law, that's another matter. If it's considered a war, Trump should have the authorization of Congress, which he will not ask for. But that's another story. From international point of view, it would be legal. And personally, I've been asking countries to help the Venezuelan people because it's in our interest. They are the #1 disruptor who are trafficking cocaine, which is the #1 reason for crime. We have here in Sweden have a crime spree, and this cocaine plays a big role in that crime spree. But people refuse to see that and connect the dots. We should be helping the Venezuelan people. But since we are not doing it, since the democracies are not helping these people who are subject to genocide and to crimes against humanity, then we leave the door open for an autocrat like Donald Trump to go in and do it for his own personal reasons, which I would not believe good a second. But that's where we are. It's a parallel to Finland, 1939, when Stalin attacked Finland. Who came to Finland's help? Finland was a democracy. Who came to Finland's help? Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich. Because democracies are usually too coward to act. Actually, Sweden also helped Finland because we have a Swedish-speaking minority in Finland. My grandfather was from Finland too. So Sweden also helped. And maybe thanks to that, Finland managed to maintain its democracy and did not fall into either Nazism or communism like the others did in Europe. And that's my point with Venezuela. If we, the democracies, we who believe in liberty and democracy, help the Venezuelan people, we strengthen liberty and democracy in the world. But if we don't, it will be a case of where two dictatorial systems fight over the prey. And that's the worst outcome possible. So therefore, we must help the Venezuelan people. The cause of the Venezuelan people is our cause. And it also goes for Colombia. It's been gone for... the reason Colombia is in a civil war for so long is because Cuba is behind it. Cuba is the one who supported and started this guerrilla. The real root of the problem in the Americas is Cuba. So it's not just a matter of liberating Venezuela. Cuba also has to be liberated. And Nicaragua has fallen into the same. So Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela are three countries in the same system. But taking them on all at once is a little bit complicated. Venezuela is the key. Venezuela is where the cocaine is grown, is processed, and Venezuela is where the revenues from oil came from that financed these terrorists, because they're also involved in international terrorism and supporting Hezbollah, Hamas. Who do you think financed Hamas to do these terror attacks in Israel? Venezuela did. You have to see how everything is connected globally and not just see each thing individually. People who go up on YouTube and make videos about this and talking about how Trump will attack Venezuela, they fail to see the global connection and why this is necessary. But we should be helping Venezuela and not leave this on the table for Trump. That was a big blunder that the democracies did and the Democrats in the United States did by not helping the Venezuelan people to become free when they had a chance. So that's how I see this. I believe that there will be an attack, and there is good chance that the Venezuelans will be able to rise up against this and overthrow the regime, and I believe they will be able to take the power and control it, but they absolutely will need the help of democracies in the world. They will need the help of us in Europe, Canada, Australia, and so on. It's in our interest. They are key for the cocaine, and the cocaine is key for crime. So it's in our interest. Now I will finish. Thank you for watching, and please do share and subscribe, and I hope you got a little bit wiser from this.